Hello, and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Vandy Terrio, career and HR coach, Rise Smart. We're excited to have Vandy with us for a keynote presentation titled Supercharging Talent Analytics with AI/ML. Welcome, Vandy. Over to you.
Thank you, Nick. I'm excited to be here with you all today. My name's Vandy, and I'm a career coach and HR coach. I've been in the field of HR for about 20 years now, working in aerospace, broadcast media, banking, and finance, and have really had a consistency around workforce planning. It's my passion. It's one of the things that I love to do, whether that's coaching employees or managers or candidates or supporting organizations, with ensuring readiness of their workforce and capabilities for what's next in their strategy. And I would say one of the things, that I am really passionate about in terms of AI and this topic is really empowering leaders to think about being proactive with workforce planning and building an AI-ready workforce so that we can really advance careers and advance capabilities and hopefully prevent as much as possible layoffs. And I think that's a real opportunity in terms of what's ahead and trying to understand, the overall opportunity and risks within this field. So I'm not an expert in this area. I was originally signed up to be a moderator and was asked for the opportunity to do this and accepted. But I will say, it is an ever-changing area and landscape. So I hope I give it justice today, but there are a lot of unknowns and a lot of areas that still are being worked on, even, as we speak. So bear with me as we go through today's presentation and feel free to put in your questions in the chat. So a few areas we'll talk about today is the why. Why is this important today? We will talk a little bit about, AI talent and data, but really from a framework of how does this inform your workforce strategy? How does it inform how you develop your plan around workforce planning, in particular, automation and augmentation? And, the area that we all hear about is upskilling. And what are some of the areas that we should be concentrating in terms of building frameworks to help upskill in the areas that are most in demand? And how can we leverage partnerships and as well as AI to help us build those frameworks? And finally, I don't think any AI topic would be complete without talking about ethics and responsibility. And in this topic, we'll, really keep it from an HR lens around, the who in terms of responsibility and, how in terms of some of the areas of regulation that are coming up and, some suggestions in terms of mitigating risks and working with your, legal team on understanding how to protect your organization. So we'll first start here with defining the problem and the opportunity around AI and building a talent strategy. And one of the things I think is important is to make sure, there's consistency and clarity around talking about AI and understanding the definition that's used in this presentation. I would also recommend, as you talk with your leaders, that there's a shared understanding of how AI is defined, whether it's with the executive team, your board, or your employees. Making sure that there's a common language is really important. So for today's presentation, I'm using a Congress recent definition, which is AI is a machine-based system that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments. So we've had, technology disruption. I feel like it's been, at least for my whole career, and certainly I would say starting in, 2000, technology and disruption remaining relevant. It's always been on the agenda for most organizations. But what makes AI different? And I think, in the last year, what we've seen is the headlines around AI, the hype has really remained center stage. And a big piece of that is just because of the quickness to market and the impact that it's having on organizations in terms of increasing the value, relevancy in the market, time to market, and overall, productivity. And so that's why we see, this being talked about. Sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of these titles, in the headlines are pretty scary. And so while there may be a few headlines that talk about, great jobs or that are coming or the advantages of AI and, reducing perhaps disparity, increasing organizational justice, there seems to be far more gloom and scary headlines than there are positive. And so I think that is also another reason why, as HR leaders, we need to be really mindful of the fact that our, the employees that we support, are seeing these headlines every day. So a recent headline that shows, these active sort of partnerships and conversations around this is the one here at the bottom. Around, Microsoft partnering recently with labor unions and having open, honest dialogues about training and preventing job loss. So just important to know in terms of, the tea leaves and what, your workforce is maybe worried about. So getting to, again, the why, some of the key drivers. This is a report. McKinsey does a CEO Excellence Survey report. And their 2023 report did highlight that CEOs and boards, their 3 top priorities this year and going into 2024 are disruptive technology, ensuring that their organizations are able to remain relevant, speed to market, ensure they're able to take advantage of operational savings, and really increase productivity as well. Inflation in the economy remain also, number 2 as a priority. And this gets into a lot of supply chain relationships where AI also is coming to the forefront as well. And then there continues to be geopolitical risks as well. And, what does that mean in terms of the economy? And how do we have risk mitigation plans for that? So if you think about these 3 things, from an HR leadership perspective and your overall talent strategy, some of the key actions that translate into that is, ensuring that, again, you have the right people, the right capabilities, that there's, we've got a roadmap for change. How are we looking at the ways in which we work, how we work? There's also a lot going on in terms of regulation as well as automation too in the area of working with supply chains and getting organizations ready to get to net zero emissions and align to climate change regulations and priorities in that space as well. So as we look deeper into the macro level, kind of getting into different industries and specific impacts, one of the recent reports, and this was also from McKinsey's report as well, breaking down what is the value of industries gaining from AI. And the top 4 industries, well, they have stated that pretty much every industry will have gains with AI. The top 4 that were listed were tech, and the specific area of opportunity and value is in software engineering. automating the ability to accelerate code development and really gaining that velocity to the speed to market. And banking, that's an industry that came in as number 2. There's a lot of opportunity. One of the biggest areas of lifts is in legacy code conversion. Rather than having to do a huge overhaul of systems that have been around for quite some time, really being able to use AI and overlays to automate things such as underwriting and areas where there is, a lot of text regulations to automate the decision-making process and also provide more customized solutions and services to customers as well. And I would say that last part also translates to retail. I think the unique thing that I've learned on retail as well is that it gets also into the marketing and consumer research and automating a lot of that, as well as A/B testing. In addition, it's creating synthetic customers to really help reduce inventory to ensure that they have the right products that align to consumer demand. And the last one here that was cited was pharma and medical devices, really accelerating not only research, but also making the research more customized to disease and to patient in particular needs. One area that McKinsey really broke down was in retail and broke down like the overall estimated value of AI and integrating that into retail, including auto dealership. And it was estimated about $310 billion in value for the retail industry as a whole. So we can see, with both, why CEOs have this priority, but also specifically how it's hitting industries across the globe. So then getting into specifically, how do we translate the business strategy, the priorities of the business into the people strategy? That's nothing new. We've been doing that pretty much, for forever. The focus that's new is really how do you integrate AI and from a lens of really understanding the value that it can add in terms of automation and augmentation, as well as, implementing it, including, your change strategy and upskilling as well. So one of my early, my early experiences that I have reflected on quite a bit is I had the opportunity early in my career to be a part of a team and on the prime contract for shuttle retirement. I did not have any idea what workforce planning was, and that was my first experience with workforce planning, and it was a monster. It was huge, all these centers, including both, the centers and contractors, understanding what do we have today, roles, capabilities, how do we map that to constellation, what was at the time Moon to Mars. It was a great opportunity to really learn how to do workforce planning. And it took a lot of time, and, it was incredible, the partnerships of understanding at just such a granular level, how those demands match to ONET, Department of Labor ONET, and how to partner with universities and gain grants to really not just support the workforce, but also the community, and ensuring, we had the right roles and the right career opportunities for the future. And then, I would say probably 4 years into it, it was canceled. So Constellation was canceled. And the thing that I reflect on quite a bit in this environment, the VUCA environment, is that when we look at workforce planning, we really have to reinvent and do it differently, because it is such a, volatile and changing climate. We have to be ready to adjust. And it's very difficult to do that with spreadsheets and extensive plans. And so looking at how we apply workforce planning in a way that we can be agile when things do change is really important. So some of the things, that I've learned in the last week or so of understanding this topic a little bit better is that it's more than just understanding, like, what are your critical roles, what are your misaligned roles and impacted roles, but rather looking at it from, which roles are going to be most transformed. And a lot of times in the past, the impacted roles would typically be one of the last roles to look at, and your critical roles, we would prioritize that. And this new approach is looking at it from a perspective of really understanding, what roles are impacted the most from your organization, so that you can hopefully begin to upskill and transition, employees into roles that offer more opportunity and more value and more career growth for them as well. So understanding which roles have the largest productivity gains. We'll talk about some different techniques to use, potential vendors and approaches that are in the market right now, as well as just understanding the risks. And as I was talking about earlier, what are the organization's risks in terms of looking at, the most important roles and capabilities and the demands of the organization, whether that's retention risk, burnout, lack of capabilities, or maybe not even knowing what capabilities that you have and what is needed. So what are the risks and how do you mitigate around those risks? So an example of kind of looking at this from a new approach, here is one case study. Certainly, different applications could be used, but this is an example of how one AI startup, WorkHelix, is using their AI platform to really advance workforce planning in a very nimble way, and helping really with the decision, framework of where do we even start. So one of the things they do is they look at, it's an overlay with it's part of your HR stack, overlay of your HRIS system. They're looking at your total positions and really mapping it to ONET. And the AI system will then identify all the different tasks within the roles that you have, and look at the opportunity for augmentation and productivity lifts. And then from there, prioritize, where an organization should consider starting in terms of identifying, which positions have the most opportunity to be augmented. And then what then, are those opportunities in terms of roles and tasks, so that you can begin to build, a playbook around that. So understanding whether you're using a vendor or a partnership to get a good idea of, the work lifts and opportunities that AI can present. It helps you to better understand, how do you then apply workforce strategies. And, I do like that there's been changes in terms, I think this used to be like 6 Bs or something. It was really confusing. Whoops, I'm so sorry. And it seems like the new framework has it condensed to around kind of 4 areas. Build is pretty much the same. How do you reskill to demand? How do you understand what roles you're going to be prioritizing based on functions, roles and skills? By which roles are you going to, hire, or in some cases, perhaps, an acquisition or IPO acquisition, where is that the organization would be best served to looking at hiring talent. And then borrow. This is a big area, and you see a lot of it in the marketplace, and a big shift, whether it's, noted in earnings calls, or looking at the types of jobs that are posted today, that there's a big emphasis on partnerships. And so what organizations, that could be higher ed, that could be partnering with a coaching organization to really help with executing your strategies. It also could be partnering with, gig economy to look at different ways to execute on the demand as well. And the final one that's a new one is bot, which areas of, the demand in your workforce, which roles, which tasks could be automated through AI or through, other means of technology. So then we get into really upskilling. We've heard a lot about this, and there's a lot going on in terms of precision upskilling pathways and partnerships. So some of, the biggest risk in terms of being able to implement a workforce plan is not being able to get at a granular level the skills that are necessary. And so that's cited as, one of the biggest failures in digital transformations is not being able to have the capabilities that are needed. And just kind of a quick overview, the biggest shifts we're seeing with AI is a reduction in the physical and manual skills, those kind of repetitive skills, basic cognitive skills, with a big emphasis more on social and emotional skills, which I think is somewhat overlooked right now in the dialogue, and the technology skills or hard skills. And understanding like what your organization, what the demands are, again, is really important to break down, knowing like what the list will be. What are those tasks today based on which roles you're going to prioritize, and knowing, how much time it takes to execute a task today, what the lifts are with AI. These are some samples from a company called Workaria and their study on AI lifts. And this is also just another case study in terms of the approach of using, skill matrices, enterprise skill matrix to make sure that how you upskill is actionable. A lot of times we get at a very high level of understanding capabilities that are needed, but we're not benchmarking it, not knowing how we're standing out. And so this is an example of how Workaria takes capability demands and actually will compare your workforce, where you're at in terms of beginner developer, to industry benchmarks, and then particularly the industry that you're targeting to compete in. And this seems to be like also another area where there is confusion between the job description and what the organization thinks people are doing and versus what they're actually doing. So this system actually does get into more of a granular level of understanding those skills. So here's an example of like the difference in that. Skill ontology is understanding the relationship. So without doing this, doing it sort of the former way, you're looking at high level skills. That could be leadership or, Python, looking at it at a very high level. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of bias that gets in here because the way we're evaluating it through peer evaluations, self-evaluations, resume, that sort of thing. The new focus is really moving more towards the granular skill level approach. So, looking at data science and understanding like what is the domain in terms of, data science, and really breaking it down in terms of, regression analysis, data cleansing, all the way down into the individual skills that are needed, which makes it more actionable and easier to measure for the organization, but also easier for the employees to also get excited about and have accountability and measure their progress with something that is very actionable and laid out for them in terms of growth and opportunity. So, trying to look at the skills matrix and developing an enterprise skill matrix. Here are some of the questions. I won't go through all of them. They'll be provided, I believe, in the deck, but just some great questions that you can at least get started with, in asking leaders and managers as well as employees, and making sure to include them in the conversation. And the top 4 questions, that are really recommended are what are the skills that are needed? how can we transform and reskill for AI? How do you develop governance for AI systems? And then what training and best practices, what programs, what partnerships might we be looking at? Well, finally, I'm just going to run through ethics because it's not an area that there's a lot changing in this area. So we'll kind of keep it really, again, to HR and some of the things, we should be looking out for. We'll start with just saying, at the very top in terms of AI leadership, boards, founders, investments and startups, there's still not a lot of diversity. And so it's something to be very mindful of, that there is, still risks and dangers around bias and inequity. Here are some examples, and I do use AI every day, Claude. And, one of the things I was kind of asking about is, to give some examples on topics, and titles. And I think it's interesting, like even when you do prompts and say, like, try to train to say, hey, we want to prompt and make sure there's diversity included. And the output is still coming up with, notes of gender bias, two heads are better than one, partnering man and machine. So as an example of bias where, training your workforce to understand their obligations and, governance and being mindful and aware that how these things are developed, that there's bias still baked in them. This other one is a resume from a female product leader who actually went to a college of women, and I didn't ask for a name, but I got an output back of John Smith. So just indicators of reminder of that the code is still developed by people and their experiences, and bias can be baked in, and it's something we have to be mindful of. Keeping an eye out on the EEOC and the AI and logarithmic fairness initiative. There's a lot going on here. The big takeaways are just ensuring that at the end of the day that the partners you're partnering with, especially if it comes into selection instruments or how you're using AI for decision making, that you're in alignment with Title VII and adverse and diverse impact, disparate impact, and ensuring that there's accountability. So there's a lot going on in AI, and there's just recently an executive order issued by the White House on safety around AI, but there's still not a lot of accountability. And so just knowing employers, do hold that accountability, some things to be considering, and working with your legal team as you look at the vendor selection is ask for, their safety test results and their technical manual, the same thing that you would ask for in selection, understand what validity looks like, what does, any adverse impact look like for selection. What's their privacy? Ensure you've got an AI vendor code of conduct, and maybe consider indemnification, because again, there's not a lot of accountability at this point. I'm sure it's going to come, but a lot, even with the executive order that was recently issued, it's a volunteer for AI organizations. And this is just a reminder that, the EEOC is very firm in taking this really seriously, and recently sued a tutoring company that had a software program that had built-in code that rejected female applicants, that were over 55 and male over 60. So that ruling actually just came out a couple of weeks ago, where they settled and have to pay $365,000 to I think about 200 applicants that were adversely impacted. Finally, just ending here with a great quote by Daniel Kahneman, and it's around decision making, that courage is the willingness to take risk once you know the odds, Optimistic overconfidence means you're taking the risk because you don't know the odds. And that's really a big difference. And so really understanding, the data and, the priorities around AI and understanding what the risks are, what the opportunities are, is something, every HR leader really needs to get their arms around and work with, your key stakeholders as you're making decisions and implementing your strategy and your overall workforce plan. One of the leaders in this space is Andrew Ning. He's the founder, CEO of Coursera and Landing AI. He also just recently was awarded one of Time's 100 top AI leaders. But last week, he issued a statement around, AI and ethics. And I would highly recommend reading it. It really was eye-opening to understand him explain, how AI is a general purpose technology, much like electricity, and really how to break down the regulations and risk into regulating the application versus regulating the technology. And it is really eye-opening, and I would highly recommend it because it does help in terms of understanding our role in terms of how we apply this technology in the workforce and our workforce strategy. So thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Okay, Vanny. Well, maybe we can squeeze one question in. How will AI work successfully alongside existing employees to improve productivity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, what we're learning, the three areas and that have the biggest lift at the highest level, are going to be roles, which is pretty much everybody has a role where there is, text, documentation, and, that type of lifting that type of load for employees in any role, whether that's customer service or marketing or HR, being able to utilize those lifts and the language modeling, processing of that information is really the opportunity to reduce time. I think with that one slide that shows like some of the lifts that you gain in each area, is a good idea of seeing specifically, the types of tasks that are related to documentation and text and decision making that AI can, be sort of a co-pilot to the employee.
Great. Well, thank you again, Vandy, for such an incredible keynote. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the event. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. We look forward to seeing you at our next Argyle Digital HR event soon. Have a great rest of your day.